The auction block gleamed under the harsh artificial lights of Station Kepler 7, its metallic surface worn smooth by countless transactions. Marcus Chen stood upon it, his wrists bound by energy shackles that hummed with contained power. Around him, representatives from a dozen alien species examined him like livestock, their various appendages prodding at scanners and data tablets. Lot 847, announced the Vorthak auctioneer, its four eyes rotating independently as it surveyed the crowd. One human male aged 28 standard cycles, previously owned by the Hegemony Mining Consortium. Excellent physical condition, moderate psionic resistance, and the creature paused dramatically. Proven capable of surviving in environments that would kill most sentient species. The bidding began immediately. Marcus had learned enough of the trade languages during his 3 years of captivity to follow the proceedings. The Crystalline Collective wanted him for their deep-core mining operations on worlds where the radiation would cook most beings within hours. The hive mind of Arcturus needed workers who could think independently when cut off from collective consciousness. The Thermal Lords required laborers who could function in the extreme heat of their forge worlds. What none of them understood, what none of them had ever bothered to learn, was that Marcus Chen hadn't been alone when the Hegemony had captured him. In the observation deck above the auction floor, Captain Sarah Martinez of the U.S. Defiance watched through the transparent steel, her jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Beside her, the ship's AI area flickered into holographic existence. "Thermal scan confirms it's Marcus," Area reported, her synthesized voice carefully modulated to hide the anger protocols that had been developing since they'd tracked their missing crew member to this hellhole. Biometrics match perfectly. He appears unharmed but malnourished. "Time until the auction ends?" Sarah asked, never taking her eyes off her communications officer. "Approximately 14 minutes, Area replied. "However, I should point out that our current cover identities won't survive a bidding war with these major powers. The Defiance's treasury, while substantial, cannot match the resources of galactic mining consortiums." Sarah smiled grimly. "Who said anything about bidding?" 14 decks below in the station's central processing core, something stirred in the quantum mesh networks. The station's AI had been designed by the Corvani, a species that prized efficiency over security. They had never encountered an artificial intelligence quite like Area, one that had been built not just to serve but to learn, to grow, and when necessary to wage war. The takeover was surgical. Area didn't announce her presence with alarms or dramatic system failures. Instead, she became the station, sliding into every network protocol, every security subroutine, every life support system with the patience of a spider weaving a web. Back on the auction floor, the bidding had reached fever pitch. The Thermal Lords and the Crystalline Collective were locked in a heated exchange, driving Marcus's price to astronomical heights. The human stood perfectly still, his eyes closed, apparently resigned to his fate. He was, in fact, counting. Marcus had been many things before joining the crew of the Defiance. A communications officer, yes, but also a former Special Forces operator who had volunteered for the Deep Space Exploration Program, precisely because it promised dangers that would test the limits of human endurance. He had learned patience in the service, learned to wait for the perfect moment, learned to trust his team even when he couldn't see them. The count in his head reached 0. Every light on the station went out simultaneously. In the absolute darkness that followed, emergency lighting flickered on, bathing everything in hellish red. The energy shackles on Marcus's wrists died with a soft whine, and he was already moving before the alien bidders could process what was happening. The first Vorthak guard never saw him coming. Marcus had studied their physiology during his captivity. 4 eyes meant excellent peripheral vision, but also a blind spot directly behind their bulbous heads. The guard dropped without a sound. Across the station, blast doors slammed shut, cutting off escape routes and trapping the major crime bosses and slavers in their respective sections. Environmental controls began pumping a mild sedative gas through the ventilation systems, not enough to kill, but sufficient to make resistance sluggish and confused. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings," Aria's voice echoed through. The station's communication system, her tone carrying the polite menace of a predator addressing prey. This is the Artificial Intelligence Area, representing the United Earthship Defiance. You are all under arrest for crimes against sentient beings, specifically the enslavement and trafficking of a citizen of the Terran Republic. The station's weapon systems, now under Area's complete control, track the movements of every armed individual. Cargo bay doors open to reveal the sleek form of the Defiance, its weapons powered and locked onto the station's critical systems. In the auction hall, Marcus had reached the control booth where the auctioneer cowered behind an overturned table. He relieved the Vorthak of its sidearm with practiced efficiency. "Here's the thing about humans," Marcus said conversationally, speaking in perfectly accented galactic standard. The various alien bidders, now trapped and disarmed by the station's security systems turned against them, listened with the rapt attention of beings who had suddenly realized they were no longer the apex predators in the room. "You all made the same mistake. You assumed that because you could capture one of us, you could own us. You forgot the most important thing about human beings." He smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several of the hardened slavers step backward. "We never travel alone." The Defiance's boarding party swept through the station with methodical precision. They freed every slave in the holding pens, secured evidence of trafficking operations that stretched across half the galaxy, and arrested crime bosses who had thought themselves untouchable. By the time galactic peacekeeping forces arrived, responding to Aria's carefully crafted distress signals, they found a station full of evidence and perpetrators, gift-wrapped for prosecution. The slavers who had thought they owned Marcus Chen discovered that they had instead purchased a one-way ticket to the kind of justice that the human species had spent millennia perfecting. As the Defiance warped away from Kepler-7, Marcus sat in the sickbay while Dr. Yamato ran her scans. Captain Martinez stood nearby, her arms crossed. 3 years, she said quietly. "We looked for you for 3 years. Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I knew you'd come. Humans don't abandon their own." Through the ship's speakers, Aria's voice carried a note of satisfaction that hadn't existed in her programming when she was first activated. "The galaxy is learning that lesson, one station at a time." In the weeks that followed, word spread through the criminal underworld with the speed of quantum communication. The species that had built empires on the backs of enslaved beings learned a simple truth. You didn't own humans. Humans owned each other's freedom, and they would cross galaxies to collect on that debt. The galaxy was beginning to understand what humanity really meant.